Hi, this is the reading of Gold Cord by Amy Carmichael, Prelude to Chapter 3. I pray God to keep alive a band of Puritans, for they are the ones that make the best missionaries in all the world over. Surely, what we want now is more fire. I do not see much sign of it. The fire that comes from tribulation and persecution, I mean. Would that the Union, Cambridge Christian Union, had not such an easy time of it now. Let us promote a foreign campaign again. Where are the prophets with a vision of the world's need? Let them arise and call the movement to go forward. Excuse me. He himself, in the singleness of purpose, stripped his life with something of sternness, of all that was superfluous. I'm so sorry. Or unrelated to the work in hand. His subordination of all things to the single aim was absolute. Better 1,000 times effective peculiarity than ineffective ordinariness. D. M. Thornton, A Study in Missionary Ideals and Methods by W. H. T. Gardner. To set out walking in a way worthy of the Lord to all meeting of his wishes. Colossians 1:10, Bishop Mooley, Colossian Studies. Renew our force, O Lord, that waging a tireless war against the foe, we may together forward go, undaunted by his angry raging. O Spirit of power and love, enfold us. O valiant Spirit of discipline, turn thy bright face on us and shame our dullness, and uphold us. Thou hast not given the spirit of fear. The word is strong. Be of good cheer, and thou art here. Chapter 3. To all meeting of his wishes. One evening, towards the close of 1898, 3 Indian sisters and I were on our way from a town which was then and is now given up to idolatry. In the river that flows by the town, while groups of Brahmins stood on the flat roofs of their houses and stared down disapprovingly, Walker of Tinnevelly had baptized a young man who was to become a power in the district. This man had asked us to take his wife home with us and teach her how to win souls. He followed our wagon now as it trailed along, and coming close up to its opened end, he said to his wife, "Give me your jewels." What does a winner of souls want with jewels? The girl unfastened her earrings, chains, and bangles and gave them to him, smothering her astonishment. In this simple way, what was known as the jewel question was born. For, as the girl gave her jewels to her husband, I saw an expression of intense interest pass over Ponimel's face. I quote now from the story of her life. And she told me that on the evening before, while she was speaking in the open air, she had overheard a child say to her mother that when she grew up she would join that band and wear jewels like that sister herself. The words had smitten Ponnamal. She felt this was the last impression she wished to leave upon anyone's mind. She had gone to her Lord about it, and the answer that came to her was this: Thou shalt also be a crown of glory in the hand of the Lord, and a royal diadem in the hand of thy God. She did not argue as to the meaning of these words. She saw in a flash herself, unjeweled, a marked woman among her own people, an eyesore, an offense. But, and the joy of the thought overwhelmed her, not so to the Lord her God. When we went home, she took off her jewels. How minute, how inoffensive the words appear now, set down in one short sentence. But every syllable in them burned for Panamal and for us who stood with her. A few, very few, but to the startled and indignant eyes that watched, it was ominous. Inebriated with divine love, eager to forsake and defy the spirit of the world, stripped themselves of every weight that they might the less laden run the race that was set before them. One who had a long struggle with herself told me that she had never gone to sleep at night without her hand on the gold chain she wore around her neck. If I had loved my Savior more, I should have loved my jewels less, she said. The last to do this difficult thing had a hard time afterwards. She was taken from us by her people and suffered many things. She was, in fact, slowly done to her death by her Christian husband, Christian in quotations. None of us touched on the subject except when privately asked what we felt, but it was impossible to speak without seeming to allude to it. How vividly as I write, an afternoon meeting in a church in the country comes back to me. The place was full, for we were in the middle of a mission, and to the Indian Christian, meetings are a sweet delight. Before me sat rows of women, and the village being rich, the lobes of their ears cut into large loops were laden with ornaments. But to me it had been given that day to look upon Christ crucified. Far, far from me was any thought of the women's golden toys. All eternity was around me, and that common little building was the vestibule thereof. Then, as I spoke, I saw a woman rise. She told me afterwards that she could not bear it. Time, and the scorn of time, and its poor estimates, how trivial all appeared. I saw him, she said, naked of this world's glory, stripped to the uttermost, and I went and made an ash heap of my pride. It was Pearl, she who was to become my sister and comrade, both in labor and in arms. This new abandonment of obedience made an immense difference. Things impossible before were now undertaken without a thought. The women were free from 1,000 nets that had entangled their feet with invisible threads. Is there any limit to what God is prepared to do for the one who loves his son well enough to meet his lightest wish? After these things, the renunciation of the choices of time, the word of the Lord came unto Abraham in a vision, saying, Fear not, I am thy shield, and that in thy exceeding great reward. After these things, not dissimilar, the word was the same here. 15 years later, as she lay slowly dying of cancer, Panamal, recalling those days, said, It was to me a new emancipation. A new sense of spiritual liberty is bound up in my mind with that experience. It affected everything in such an unexpected way. It set my spirit free. I could not have done this new work, the work for the temple children, if it had not been for the new courage that came with that break with custom and from bondage to the fear of man. Then the father of a young convert, a man of fine character, who had allowed his daughter to be with us, sheer miracle this, hearing of what was going on, sent a message to her to this effect: If I hear you have taken off your jewels, I will come for you. Arulai, Star is her name in other stories, knew that if he took her away, he would at once have her married to a Hindu. Such a life would have been death to her. It was a tremendous decision that she made at the foot of the cross that day, but nothing anyone could say could shake her. She had seen her beloved, her Redeemer. On his brow was a crown, not of gold, but of thorns. His hands and his feet were not jeweled, but pierced. She had seen him. Could she follow him adorned with gold? We were to go to camp that night. She and I were traveling by bullock cart, and her father was to wait by the roadside and take her home if she was not wearing her jewels. How slowly that cart crawled, but the minutes ran. Our hearts were tense. We hardly spoke. We lay very close together on the mattress, spread in the cart. Would we ever be together again? A tall form loomed up through the darkness. The cart stopped. A hand was thrust into the cart. Your father could not come. He sent me, said an old voice. It was Star's grandfather. For my father, this parcel, she said, slipping into his hand the little parcel of jewels. The cart went on. What happened then in the invisible world, we do not know. We only know that something must have happened, for Star was left with us to be our fellow warrior in the years to come. So much about so little? It did not seem little to the church. Sermons were preached about it. The vernacular press published articles on the subject, and the district rang from end to end with absurd stories about what we had done. We, whose influence it was held was responsible for the deplorable affair. For no one recognized the finger of God in this touch on the women's jewels and the men whose prestige it affected. The richer the jewels, the greater the honor to the family, were exceedingly annoyed. Straight into the turmoil of these excited feelings came in February 1899 F. B. Meyer from England. He stayed with us. We told him nothing. Missioners speaking through interpreters are not expected to probe very deep. They preach to appreciative congregations and go away blessed by all. But F. B. Meyer had been struck by the bedecked Christian women of the South. He had also come full upon caste and debt, both prickly subjects. And when he pleaded that the whole burnt offering might be laid on the altar, he named them explicitly as hindering things, instead of skating around them and giving what all India loves, a spiritual address. His words were an offense. His sensitive spirit felt this acutely. Years afterwards, he wrote to us that he had been sorely tempted over that series of meetings, and small wonder. He had spoken plain words, and the devil never forgives plainness of speech. To us who were left to bear the brunt of the blame after this most unpopular mission was over, came a great calm. We saw the road clear before us. The only thing was to go on. 2 or 3 fellow missionaries and a few Christians were one with us in spirit, and that was cheer. But we learned to go on unaffected by approval or disapproval, for the matter of the jewels was only one of a series of tests and disciplines, and we proved the truth of words that we read much later. There is always something more in your nature which he wills to mark with a cross. It was thus the heavenly builder laid the foundations of our fellowship in obedience in very small matters, and that meeting of his wishes, which does not wait for an explicit command. A wish is enough for one who loves. And because his wisdom chose thus to deal with us, it has seemed right to tell it just as it occurred. Because of that, yes, chiefly because of that, we have told it. But a question comes and will not be quieted. What might it mean? What might it not mean for others if all of us who are seeking after a country of our own, a better country, that is, a heavenly, lived more like pilgrims here? Those little Indian handfuls of gold turned to golden handfuls of help for a faraway province in China. The Lord to whom lands lie spread open like a map, and the covered poverty too, sometimes in some little house at our very door, has ways of showing where he needs that precious thing which is wasted now, like the treasure of seed not sown, but only stored. End of chapter 3. Prologue to chapter 4. And when thou comest thy tale to tell, smooth not thy tongue to file talk. Shakespeare. Going from city to city, tired and weary, always to meet with sharp opposition and cynicism, and ever new proofs of the vast and hideous oppression, is like running one's breast upon knife points, always beginning afresh before the last wound is healed. One thing we know, and that is, that all this cruelty and sin, this blinding and misleading of souls, this selfish profligacy, this slaughter of the innocents, this organized vice, this heavy oppression, is hateful in the eyes of the holy God, and we know that it must perish before the light of his countenance, when the arm of the Lord shall be revealed, and when his own arm shall bring salvation. Even out of the depths, therefore, we will praise him and rejoice for the day that is coming. Josephine Butler. Chapter 4, The First Child. Once out on the rough grass that stretches beyond a noted temple near the sea, 1,000 or more miles from Donhaver, we came on a group of women surrounding a five-legged calf. One by one, the women were dropping silver coins on the back of the calf. As each coin fell, the little animal shivered. The falling of the coins tickled it. The shiver was merely that. But to the women, there was something mysterious in it. So they worshipped, folding their hands and bowing. And the owner of the calf gathered up the coins with a smile, extraordinarily like the enigmatical smile of Mona Lisa. Farther down on the grass, we saw more animals with added limbs. Each had its attendant who swept up the silver grains. Grass, withered and brown, but still innocent grass. Air, clear and blue. Sky, cloudless. Sea, clean and glorious. But behind each little calf we saw a stark and cruel thing, an operation without an anesthetic on two animals, the one from which the limb was cut, the creature unto which it was grafted. The law forbids this operation to be done in public. No one asks where it is done or what is done, if only it be not done in the open street. And no one asks what has happened to make a normal boy or girl one who will be abnormal, demoniacal. And no one asks where the deed was accomplished or the series of deeds that ends in the forming of character, earthly, sensual, devilish. In that town which exists for the temple, there are secret corners. The temple itself is a secret. Once, long ago, someone went up the steps and in through the door, which opens on a wide street. He told what he saw. It was never forgiven. Now only worshippers may go up those steps and through that door. The temple itself is not imposing. It is not like our towered temples of far south. An immense wall surrounds it. But from what can be seen from without and from photographs taken from adjacent roofs, it appears a squat structure or conglomeration of structures clustered together, and reminds one of nothing so much as the monstrous Indian spider, which hangs its web from branch to branch of forest trees and lies in wait in the middle. The web is strong enough to hold little birds. From such webs our children are disentangled. But bright birds and butterflies indeed. Nothing written here or elsewhere in this book or in any Donover book is told in forgetfulness of the sins of the West. We all live in glass houses. Not one of us can throw stones. And we do not forget what Indian men and women are doing to end the wrongs that still persist. If what we write be read in the spirit which urges the writing, then India's own sons and daughters will be strengthened in their work by a new force of prayer and sympathy. We would have been as others who see without seeing and never dream of what is being done out of sight if it had not been for what was caused to happen on March 6, 1901. I will tell it briefly, for it has been told before. Pearl Eyes, a child of 7, whose father, a thoughtful and scholarly Hindu landowner, had recently died, was allowed by her mother to pay a visit to women of whose occupation that mother knew little. They were servants of the gods, women belonging to a temple sacred to Perumal, one of the incarnations of Vishnu, in a village called Great Lake. This meant that each had been married to the god, and that meant deified sin. In this child, they saw one who could be trained to live that life, and they let her see things likely to accustom her to iniquity, and thus, according to the Tamil saying, that what is not bent at 5 will be unbendable at 50, tried to bend the mind of this child to their purposes. But Pearl Eyes recoiled from it all. Perhaps a natural perversity of character had something to do with it, but far more surely a certain purity of spirit, an instinctive horror of every false way worked within her, and she fled from the evil house. Her home was in Tuticorin, a town on the southeast coast, 2 days' journey by cart from Great Lake. How could so young a child go so far alone? It would take more than 2 days to walk there. She trudged off bravely. Friendly carters gave her a lift occasionally, and at last that valiant little thing found her mother's house in the big and wicked town, one of the Sodoms of this province, and she flung herself into her mother's arms, sure of safe haven there. But the temple women had followed. They threatened the mother with the wrath of the gods. Her husband had been a devout Hindu. He had been famous as a reader and expounder of the religious poetry of his nation. The fear of the gods was upon the mother. She tore her little child's arms from her neck and pushed her back to those women, and they carried her off in triumph. This decided them to marry her to Perumal as soon as possible. And Pearl Eyes overheard their conversation and thought that the idiom tied to the god meant that she would be tied with ropes to the figure of the idol she had seen in the far recesses of the temple. Terrified, she made up her mind to risk any punishment and try to escape again. But she was jealously watched. Such children of val- Such children are of value to their possessors. There were eyes everywhere. One day, it was a day of terror for that helpless child. She crossed the stone-paved floor of the temple court and, going into the dark inner cell where the idol was set, threw herself down and prayed to Perumal to let her die. At that time, we were in Dohnavur on the western side of the district, and were about to return to Great Lake, our old center in the east, where previously we had been itinerating. We left Dohnavur on March 4th, traveling, as was usual then, by night, to escape slow travel through the heat. We arrived at our old house on the 6th. That evening something happened in the temple house in the village of Great Lake. What happened? Does the story, so familiar that it has ceased to be fresh and vivid to us, tell what happened there? And behold, an angel of the Lord saying, "Arise up quickly." Pearl Eyes saw no angel, heard no voice, but someone must have touched her and said, "Follow me." For she followed, and no one saw her. Down the village street she walked, past the temple walls, and no one stopped her. Across the stream, through a little grove of palms, and onto the village beyond she ran, and then stood waiting. There a kindly woman found her, like a lost lamb looking for its fold, and she took her home for the night. But she dared not have kept her for an hour longer. "If you had not come, I would have taken her back to the temple house," she said. "An evil place is the temple house. It is good that you are back." The child told us things that darkened the sunlight. It was impossible to forget those things. Wherever we went after that day, we were constrained to gather facts about what appeared a great secret traffic in the souls and bodies of young children, and we searched for some way to save them and could find no way. The helpless little things seemed to slip between our fingers as we stretched out our hands to grasp them, or it was as though a great wave swept up and carried them out to sea. In a kind of desperation, we sought for a way, but we found that we must know more before we could hope to find it. To graze upon the tips of herbage is the Tamil expression for superficial knowledge. If we were to do anything for this children, it was vain to graze on the tips of facts. It took years to do more than that. When at last we had learned things of which we were sure, we told them. We could not tell them fully, and why should we? We told what we could and left the rest to intuition and a compassionate imagination. Note: we dare not do more than allude to the fact that children are brought up and kept in many of the idol temples for the vilest purposes, wrote the Reverend William Pakenham Walsh in 1862. We came upon his little old book in 1910, but in 1927 something more than illusion appeared. Mother India and Slaves of the Gods tore veils from the face of things. The author of those books had to suffer. She did not care how she suffered, if only woman or child could be helped thereby. She did not profess to show India as a whole. Great beautiful fields of Indian life are touched. She told what is harder to tell, because the one who tells it is misunderstood, even by those whom she seeks to serve. Of the heart behind they know nothing. We who love India and yet love truth, we understood. End of note. The things that we saw haunted us. They are endurable now only because, as time goes on, something is being done towards their ending. And because of the certainty of their utter annihilation at the coming of the King of righteousness, with cause that hope sustains thee. Often the word spoke. Dagon must fall. And after the children came, we learned to live two lives. The haunted one was pushed far underneath. Gaiety, not specters, should walk in the children's world. Sometimes we felt as though the things that we had seen and heard had killed forever the laughter in us. But children must have laughter round about them. Some guests to Dohnavur see nothing but the laughter side, the joy of flowers and babies. But a few see deeper, and it is for such this book is written, and to such the word will come. Inasmuch as ye have done it unto the least of these, ye have done it unto me. We discovered nothing by asking questions. To ask was to close every door. To be foreign in dress, food, or ways would have been to lock those doors, the only doors to knowledge. We learned by quietly sharing as much as we could in the life of the people, by listening, not by questioning. Panamal, one of the three Indian sisters of those early days, used to travel with me, and together we stayed in some wayside shelter, often only a roof on pillars, or with a convert girl who had married and lived in a temple town. Once we camped in a cow barn in a city slum, and Panamal, who had never slept on a dirty floor, comforted herself by remembering Bethlehem. Wherever a mat could be spread on the ground, there we stayed for as long as we could stand the noise and glare and heat and smells. I wrote to missionaries all over the province, trying to find some way to reach the children, but no one could tell me of any way. Some questioned their existence. Government blue books occasionally alluded to them, but busy missionaries have no time to read blue books. We ourselves knew nothing of those books till long after we were embarked on the work. But there were two who wrote words of valiant comradeship. One, an SPG missionary to whom had been given a child, who would have been sent to a temple had he not taken her. The other, an American woman who was very deeply moved. But neither she nor he could suggest anything hopeful. I had one other memorable letter. It was from the daughter of a government official. She had saved a child who had grown up to break her heart, but she was quick with sympathy. Her letter was a treasure to me. So a little later was one from an LMS veteran. These 4 letters were all the human cheer that was granted in those early days. The thing that we wanted to do appeared to be impossible. It was all disappointment and never a little one saved. But is it in vain, says the old Tamil proverb, if the heart of God's servants burn and smoke? No, it cannot be in vain. End of chapter 5. Thank you for listening. Please share if you like this book. Thank you.